really pleased with the partnership that we have with Del Valle High School and have a number of interns that go through our program for a Global Scholars Certificate. So the Global Scholar Certificate program, we've been, for a year now, working with various students from Del Valle and of course engaged in some of the video conferencing in the past. We have had a good opportunity to talk with a number of the interns and learn more about what their plans are for the next few years. So this is an important collaborative initiative that we have with schools around the world.
Okay, and tell us a little bit about the speaker that you're about to hear.
Yeah, we're going to hear from a former German Foreign Office official. He's a former ambassador for Germany to Trinidad and Tobago, and also Consul General in San Francisco, as well as Deputy Consul General in New York City, and representing Germany throughout that time. So it's going to be a really interesting discussion today on what the effects are and how Germany has come to terms with its past. So it's going to be an informal discussion so we can have feedback from both the students and get their impressions as well about Germany and what the future holds.
Okay. Do you have any questions on what we're going to do today or anything? Or Enrique, why don't you explain a little bit about your background?
Oh my God. I am from Lima, Peru. We are connected with Austin, Texas from many years ago. Mr. Cunningham is encouraging students. My students also located in France, Ukraine, and the Philippines, Vietnam, and China. Really, we work and we love what we do because we share our differences in the cultural, economical, and historical context, and we are now connecting by using this wonderful highway of knowledge, internet. But more than that, I am very grateful to Mr. Cunningham to promote this kind of approach, and he is doing great effort, and I appreciate a lot your interest being part of this generational change, because we now can experience your interest improving the way of acquiring knowledge. It is a real nice experience to meet people like you who are interested in improving the educational background in the places that we were not a long time ago connected, but now by the magic of technology and also with the good heart of people like you and Mr. Michael Cunningham, we can share this exceptional experience of sharing knowledge and at the same time know about your social experience and what you plan to do in benefit of the students all over the world. Your term idea Obaya Hussein.
Yes, I'm very happy to be here in the very experienced sessions, and I hope that this session will enrich my knowledge and experience, and I think that this international representatives will enable us to share the practical experience, and will be able to find out the real cause of the history of the Holocaust. And I think that we can also enrich our students, and they will be able to discover the real issues behind the Holocaust, and time of the world, exactly what was the sentiment of the Germans and the people of the world. I think that it will really enrich our students to find the real history of the historical genocide in Germany, and we can know about the anti-Semitism and about the cause and the aftermath of the anti-Semitism and Adolf Hitler's genocide. So we will also connect our students so that they can also share the views and their ideas regarding the historic concept.
Very good. So it looks like we're getting the students here in the room now, and we'll be able to start in a few moments once Mr. Cunningham returns.
I said hi to them. I can't introduce myself real quick. I'm Tashari Angel. I'm the CT coordinator for WIIC.
Oh,
Yeah, it's really cool.
So what's the setting there? I mean, we're not standing here. We're going to be there, or
I'm pretty sure you're going to be standing here.
Oh, so we were standing here talking to them, but talking to the students.
The students are going to be here, so yeah.
Looks like a jury.
Yeah, it is. So this is a brand new courtroom.
Yes, absolutely.
This was built last year. We haven't been here before, and there's the deliberation room back there also.
Okay.
So, have you been to our campus before?
I have.
Oh, okay, I got you.
And I had a tour with Norris before.
Oh yeah, right.
Seen some of the areas and walked right now, the pharmacy and
Oh yeah, health science.
health science.
Yeah.
So it's all of the skills that we bring back to the American students and the neglected areas.
Right.
And Del Valley being a huge investment. What you saw was
Yeah, absolutely.
that you can
It's a huge push of even, from federal government down to states to local government, so to bring back technical education. So we're just trying to support programs now. We have this facility, now we're trying to get people in and support our kids and skills. So thank you guys for coming in. I don't want to interrupt it too much. I just wanted
No,
to come by.
I'd just like to find out slowly what's happening here and how we're going to do this.
For sure. And Norris had to do another event this morning, so he couldn't just say hi, so he wanted me to make sure to say hi. Yeah, thank you for both being here.
Okay.
Now, we're kind of a little bit different today because I want to be able to see. So we're going to have some people behind the speaker asking questions as well as you guys asking questions. So if you can, try to stay mute until you come to ask a question. Did you want to have some comments first before you ask questions, or how do you want to do it?
Well, we could. Do you want me to introduce myself?
Yeah,
introduce
yourself.
Background, and then if you want to have just a short introduction into how we deal with the past, and then 5 minutes or so, and then we just go on.
Fine.
Okay. But I'm going to address you, no? Or is this just the jury behind me that is going to?
You try to address both. It's going to be universal. It's got two things at once. Yeah, all right. Okay, good. Sorry.
Well, let me kick it off, and since we're going to record it, and say thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate that, you taking some time on this schedule for this visit. So I'm Ben Ramirez. I'm the Vice President with the World Affairs Council of Austin, and today's program is made possible through a partnership with Wunderbar Together, the World Affairs Councils of America, as well as the American Council on Germany. So it looks like we got a little bit of feedback there. But as I was mentioning, thank you, Michael. So today's program has been made possible through a partnership with Wunderbar Together, the World Affairs Councils of America, and the American Council on Germany. We have the pleasure of having a guest speaker who traveled in just this morning to be with us and to discuss how Germany is coming to terms with its past. We are very fortunate to have the speaker who has graduated from the University of Hamburg with a degree in political science. He then moved from Germany to a kibbutz, Ramat Rachel, near Jerusalem. And after about 4 years, he decided to join the German Foreign Service in 1979. He had a lengthy career representing the Federal Republic of Germany around the world in posts including Buenos Aires, Algiers, Tel Aviv. He also was ambassador to Trinidad and Tobago. He spent time in the United States in Los Angeles. He was a deputy consul general in New York City and also was consul general in San Francisco. So he, throughout that entire time, had a lot of outreach initiatives with the Jewish communities as well as synagogues, and he indeed organized several delegations of rabbis to visit Germany. So he has a long career in the German Foreign Office, and he retired from that and now is serving as a program director in the Diplomatic Academy in Berlin. So please join me in welcoming Ambassador Stefan Schlüter.
Oh, thank you. You said it all, more or less, you know. So it's perhaps there was one correction. I didn't spend that much time with kibbutz. I was just there for 6 weeks. But then I studied political science in Germany, and I finished those studies, got my master's in '79, and then I joined the Foreign Office. And then, yes, then I went to all these different postings. And I retired now in 2017. This is unfortunately obligatory retirement, 65. They pull the rug from under you, and then you have to go. I would have loved to stay on, but what I do now is I'm moonlighting a little bit, and this is not a steady job there. This is just 10 weeks a year that our diplomatic academy doesn't only teach our own young diplomats, you know, how to work and what to do, but we offer courses to foreign diplomats. And these courses are being run by retired diplomats from our own service. And I'm the one responsible for diplomats that come from Latin America and Caribbean. So when I just finished that course 2 weeks ago, and we had 14 diplomats from all over Latin America and the Caribbean in Berlin for 4 weeks. And it was very great time. They had a great time, and I think they surely will remember that. And we use this also as a networking device, you know. So they get to know Germany, and then they for the rest of their career, actually, you know, they have some connection there, and so that of course also helps us. And talking about the past, I was with them actually in Brussels also, so they would get to know the European Union, and that they would get to know NATO, and get those European institutions, get better knowledge of that. But I first took them to the battlefields of Flanders. These are the battlefields that only 100 years ago, the fighting finished there. And I just mentioned this because yesterday I was in Kansas City, and they took me to the World War I memorial they have in Kansas City, which is an absolutely astounding museum, also part of the memorial. If you have a chance to go there and see that museum. It's really outstanding. And this is one of the things that I'd like to mention, that because at that time, about 10 million soldiers lost their lives, 10 million. So just imagine, do you know how many Americans lost their lives in Vietnam? I think it was 45, 47,000, something like that. This was an average week on the Western Front during the First World War. So many people lost their lives there. Just to gain 100 yards, 200 yards, and the next time they retreat again, and so they lost, just with that, they lost like 5,000 men. And so it's 50,000 per week. And this is where Europe comes from. And when I talk now about the Holocaust and how we deal with our past, if you could imagine that what happened in the First World War with 10 million dead soldiers, I think another 10 million that were killed, civilians, innocent people. And then what we did, what Germany did afterwards, shortly afterwards only, like the Third Reich was from 1933 to 1945. So just imagine, First World War ended in 1918. And just a short while later, we committed atrocities. The German government, and in the German name, we committed that, our ancestors. And this was called, quite rightly so actually, the break of civilization. Would you imagine, just 18 years after 20 million people perished in the First World War, we did something that had been called the break of civilization. I mean, so it was so much worse than what happened actually before. And we lost the war, and we were occupied. The Russians came in from the east. The Brits, I don't know, are you familiar more or less with that history? So I don't have to go into detail there, but it's interesting to know. And the country was in ruins. And nobody, very few people actually knew the extent of what happened to the Holocaust, that we killed 6 million Jews, from small babies to old people. They were herded in the gas chambers and gassed, and then burned. So this is one of the things, that I think that will stay with us for a very, very, very long time. And after the war, there was a silence. Nobody talked about that. I mean, the perpetrators, they didn't want to talk about what they did. And the victims, interestingly enough, and I met many, many people who survived Auschwitz, they didn't tell their children what had happened in that time. So in Germany, there was in the 50s and the 60s, there was silence. Nobody really talked about that. They were all busy getting the country up and running again. And unfortunately, we had in the judiciary, in the schools, the teachers, those were all old Nazis. I mean, they didn't just vanish from the planets after we lost the war. They were still there. And so they were the teachers who taught the kids. I was lucky. I had a young teacher, and also my parents, they told me a lot. And so I grew up knowing exactly what happened. And then there were the first Auschwitz trials. They were going after the guards. And there was a very, very audacious prosecutor in Frankfurt who did that. And during these trials, and this was actually, the second one, because you may have heard about Adolf Eichmann. Mm-hmm. He was taken from Argentina to Israel. They abducted him. And he stood trial and was hanged in Israel. And he was one of the major architects of the Holocaust. He was the one who arranged for all the trains going to Auschwitz. He was the one rounding up Jews in actually the last month of the war in Hungary. By the hundreds of thousands, they were shipped to Auschwitz and gassed. And they found out where he was, where he lived, and they got him, and they put him to trial. And these were actually the first, this trial and the trial in Auschwitz. Those were the first ones where the wider audience really got a glimpse of what really had happened. And this was, we had some, student, I wouldn't say riots, but we had some very, very violent demonstrations and like a little uprising of young people in 1968. And this was caused also by that young people all of a sudden were aware, hey, what did our fathers, mothers, what did our grandfathers, grandmothers do only a short while ago at that time? And then this is, sometimes soap operas help. You may remember perhaps Holocaust. There was a series on TV in the late 70s. And that for the first time drove the message home also here in the US. In the US, nobody knew about that either. But with this soap opera, these 6 million, which is just a number, and you can't really relate to that much. But these numbers got a face because for weeks they were showing the fate of a family during the time of the Third Reich from 1933 when Hitler took power all the way to 1943 to 44 when these families went to the gas chambers. And this is something that really gripped the attention of people here in the States and also in Germany. And you might compare it to, I'm not quite sure when that came, Roots, that series, when also 78, some late 70s. So this was the same thing that all of a sudden in the US, people got aware of what was slavery like? You know, what did it mean for the people who were abducted, who were sold and then taken from Africa and then sold to the plantations in the U.S. So that was a very, very important step. And we have, so we grew up, and many in my generation, I was born in 1952, so I knew about all that. But especially the young people in the 60s and the 70s, they grew up with knowing what has happened. And for them, this was a very, very important step also to be more critical what Germany, what the government is considered. So we don't have that much of a nationalism. This is why I, for instance, now, and I'm talking in other cities also about the dangers of populism and nationalism on the rise worldwide. And I think that to a certain extent, we in Germany, we are not totally immune, but because there are so many young people in Germany who have this kind of worry attitude, you know, hey, the state, you know, we have seen, or we have in our state, so horrible things have happened that this right or wrong my country. You hear that here a lot. But that doesn't fly with German youth. You know, they are very careful, you know, when they see populism, when they see nationalism, and they go out, they demonstrate. 2 years ago, we had a right-wing demonstration, which unfortunately was allowed by the courts. So it was like, well, something like the First Amendment. So yes, they can express their views and they can demonstrate. Right in the center of Hamburg, there were 150 right neo-fascists, or fascists or neo-Nazis, were gathering. And I was one of 10,000 people who demonstrated against those 150. So when we see something like that happen, I think we are out in the streets and we do something. So this is a same thing with anti-Semitism, because most of not all, but most of the victims of the Holocaust were Jews. And they were singled out because they were Jews. They were going from house to house saying, this is a Jewish family, that's a Jewish family, that's a Jewish family, up on the truck, carry them off to the east and kill them. And so we are teaching our kids also about that part of history. And unfortunately, I must say that still, I'm not quite sure. I always say we have less anti-Semitism than most of the countries around us, and also I think less Semitism than here in the US. But still, it's absolutely shameful that with all our history, with all our efforts to teach our kids, there is still anti-Semitism also in Germany. You know, this is one of the things we just had 3 weeks ago. We had an attack on a synagogue in Halle, a fairly smallish town in eastern Germany. And thanks God, the perpetrator didn't succeed to enter the synagogue. He tried to enter it, and here in the U.S., he would have succeeded, and he would have killed at least 20, 30 people. In Germany, there were just 2 victims. Too many, but still with just 2, because he didn't make it into the synagogue, because he only had some weapons that he himself made. He found like plans on the internet, and he kind of construed his own 2 guns or whatever he had, and some explosives, and that didn't work out. Here in the U.S., he would have had an AR-15, and he would have gotten in there without any problem. He would have shut up the whole synagogue. You know? So this is, thanks God, we have different gun laws in Germany. But no matter what, no matter how many victims, but there are right-wingers with anti-Semitic attitudes. You know? This is something that's absolutely, that one should stop that in its tracks. And we have, unfortunately, now also with the rise of populism and nationalism, we have a new party that was founded actually a couple of years ago, and it was a party that had there were so-called Eurosceptics. So, and not European Union skeptics, that also, but Eurosceptics. They want to have the German mark back. They thought this was a really bad deal that we got, taking out our Deutsche Mark and getting the euro instead, like many other countries in Europe. So they wanted to change that, and they wanted to also to diminish a little bit the influence of Brussels in the internal politics of the member states of the European Union. But that was it. There was more and more economic reasons, and they might have reason with some things, but obviously don't. But this party was taken over then by the right-wingers. And they are now in the East, in the former Eastern GDR, the German Democratic Republic. They have about 20% of the vote. While in Germany, it's just about 10%. But in the East, they have that. And this is one thing that many people don't know, that when we had our unification in 1990, when the wall came down, everybody thought, hey, hunky-dory, freedom's there, so Germany is reunified. But for the people in the East, this meant an incredible hardship. Yes, they had the freedom. Yes, they could travel all over. Before they weren't allowed to do that. They got shot if they wanted to go through the Iron Curtain. They had to go through barbed wire and then mines, and many people were killed trying to do that. But on the other hand now, because the economy was in shambles, the shattered economy immediately because they were not up to the standards of a Western economy. So there were about 15 million people living in East Germany at that time, 4 million jobs. And out of this 4 million, after 3 years, you only had about 1.5 million. There were so many who left for the West, so many who lost their jobs, and there was an unemployment rate of up to 40%. And even those who still had some work, they had to go to other fields. There were so many broken biographies that there is a fairly big amount of people who were not, well, they're still hurting until today. And they want to express their protest. They think that the elites in Berlin is the one responsible for the bad shape they're in. And so they vote for a protest party, not for the Christian Democrats, the Social Democrats, the Greens, or the Liberals, those old parties that we have since the war. No, they're going for something else. And what they did, there was a leftist party. There was a leftist party that consisted of remnants of their old Socialist Unity Party in East Germany and our Communist Party. And they voted for them in droves, with the result that after a couple of years, this party got so strong that now, out of these 5 federal states that formed the GDR, in 3 of those states, 3 out of 5, these leftists are in the government. And in 1, the governor is from that party. So such a party is not really a party that you can use to express your protests. So the Alternative for Germany came along, and they are voting for them now. And they, unfortunately, they are being taken over now by right-wing radicals, and though the voters, in my view, at least 50% of them, they're just protest voters who don't really support what this party stands for. But those they elect into their positions in the parliaments, they are actually fascists and neo-Nazis. And that is really, really bothering and concerning many people. There's one guy who's now the prime candidate for the Alternative in one of the federal states in Thüringen, and they will have in a couple of days their local elections. And he went to court because somebody called him a fascist. And the court came down 2 weeks ago with the ruling, said yes, they are right. They can't call you a fascist because you are. So that's the kind of people that are running right now for office. We had another guy who's sitting in one of the states in Bavaria, one of the state parliaments, and we had 4 months ago, a German politician was killed by a right-winger and was shot. And so in the Bavarian parliament, they had a minute of silence as a memorial to honor this gentleman. And all the deputies stood up and stood there, for this minute of silence. There was one guy who just sat there, and I don't know, did his thumbs or did some notes or whatever. So, and this one of the Alternative. Even then, you don't pay lip service to something. Hey, I have to get along with this. Now I stand up. No, it's actually he demonstrated. Hey, it was right to shoot that guy. And these are the kinds of people. And the head of this party last year, famously or infamously, said that because the party is against the way we deal with our past. They say, for instance, the memorial, the Holocaust Memorial in Berlin. It's a huge, huge area, and it's a very, very impressive memorial together with the museum. They said this is a memorial of shame, and not meaning that this is, yes, we have to be ashamed for what happened. No, he says this is a memorial of shame because our nation shouldn't point out what we did. This is a shame that they're stooping so low to show the world what we actually did. And the head of the government of the party last year said, we should be really proud to be Germans, and everybody's talking about these 12 years. These 12 years, this is nothing but bird poop in the long time of our glorious German history. So these are the kind of people we're dealing with right now. But again, I think this is a minority, and they will not prevail in the long run. So this is, I think, so we did something right. And we have to be careful not to throw everything out after the attack on the synagogue in Halle 3 weeks ago by a nut. He was a nut. He was not necessarily a right winger or follower of the AfD. The guy was crazy. He said that somebody said, oh God, we have all our plans, everything that we did in the curriculums in the schools, everything what we did in the last 50 years, 60 years, we have to think, how to change that, because how could something like that happen in Germany? This is not the right way also, to deal with this problem. And this perpetrator there, that he is an interesting fellow. So he is less in the tradition, if you can say a tradition, of right-wing extremists. He's more one of those video gamers. He's one of those, who his big heroes were that Norwegian who killed 70 kids some years ago in Norway, or the one that shot up 2 mosques in Christchurch in New Zealand. I think this was last year. No? Yes, it was last year. And they are actually they're trying to over, like, oh, you killed 70. I try to better you. Perhaps I can kill 75. And it's absolutely horrible what these people think, and they treat this like a video game. When he started with his self-made weapons there, so he said he put an iPhone or some smartphone on his helmet, and this whole attack was broadcasted live on some of these dark channel sites. Yes, and he hoped to be a big hero for his fans there, and then he didn't get into the synagogue. He shot a woman, a passerby, and then went to another place and shot somebody in a restaurant that served food, because they dislike Jews, but they also dislike all the migrants that come to America. And so he actually then at the end the police got him, and he was still online, and he said, oh God, I'm such a loser, I'm sorry guys, so he disappointed his followers, and I'm a loser. So that's the kind of people you have to deal with. And this is also a problem, has nothing to do with our past, but what I hear more and more, these lonely wolves. So there are so many people who are trying to be mass murderers, who go after other people, who shoot up schools here, and they're lone wolves. And that for the authorities also is very, very difficult to find out who might be a special threat to society. Because if you have an organization, you might infiltrate, you might find out, what the kind of email exchanges there are. But with these people, very, very difficult. And then one of the things that populism, of course, nationalism has risen. The one big unifying aspect of nationalism and populism for the right is they're nativists. So they say, you know, it's always us against them. And it's always like against the migrants, against the immigration. This is the first thing they go after. And that's a huge, huge problem. And we had that, of course, in Germany. We got, within 3 months, 850,000 refugees coming into Germany within 3 months. And I remember last year, for instance, when I gave a speaking tour, and that was the time when this caravan came from Central America and from Mexico up. And everybody here, at least the Republicans, they treated that like the end of the world, and God, we are being overrun. And I was asked, and also in the Q&As there, I said, you know, what do you think about this caravan? These 5,000-6,000 people, they're coming, approaching no borders. I said, you know what? This is like in 2015, between September and December. This was what crossed into Germany on any given day in those 3 months between 8 o'clock and 10 o'clock in the morning. So there you have your big threat. And that's, okay. But that unfortunately is something that with immigration, this is a rallying cry for the right, for these populists and nationalists. And well, it's very hard to counter that, especially here in the U.S. I think I've talked enough for the time being. And why don't you just? Are you going to
we're going to start with let's start with their questions first, and then Enrique, unmute and ask the first question, okay?
No, you just mute.
Mute it. Okay. Now, if you could go ahead and ask the first question, Enrique.
I want to know, my dear friend, and thanks for your time and your great explanation about what you are trying to make these American students learn about your position, is that how the German government is using effective instructional practice in order to update and upgrade the quality of global education.
Enrique, his expertise is to teach people in Latin America, and since you're in Latin America, have you ever thought about trying to do something like he was talking about, going to Germany and studying about doing that kind of stuff, or no?
Okay. How can I make my question is that how the German government, we receive a lot of help here in Peru. We know that you are very interested in improving the global education. What are your plans in order to achieve that goal?
Well, I think with education, we are addressing our own students, and we don't have any plans actually to do anything, be it in Bangladesh, to improve education there. This is something that I think the country has to do by themselves. So it's just that we might give a good example, and an example that other states might choose to follow. But
no, I know.
Curriculum in other countries.
No, I understand your explanation. What I wanted to know is that how are you going to encourage? We know that the educational decision belongs to our own governments and also to our own people, but it is very important because you are global leaders, and what you do is going to have an impact in the process of acquiring knowledge.
You know, we have some. We try to have an impact, for instance, in the Middle Eastern conflict. the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. What we do very often, we try to help them, to the Palestinians, to write textbooks, to have the right textbooks, and to avoid anti-Semitic slurs or whatever, so that kids are not being growing up hating Jews. This is one of the things that we actually do. And other than that, I think it's just that we try to give a good example. And I remember last year I talked to a high school in Cincinnati, and I told them also what we do to raise and to educate critical children who are not just thinking this right or wrong, my country, who don't grow up with this nationalistic feeling. And I told them last year, I told them, listen, a few years ago, right or wrong, your country was Obama. And now your country is Trump. And you just say, right or wrong, that's what Obama did was right, everything. And now everything that Trump is doing is right? No. You should be critical, and you should really grow up asking the government questions and seeing also the negative sides. And there was actually, I just read a book the other day here. There are efforts here in the U.S. and teachers are being fired when they teach their kids also the critical aspects, negative aspects about the American history.
Oh, yeah.
So this is something that is absolutely wrong, because this way they try to create just people who are like this, and they don't ask somebody, don't criticize things. And last year I talked to an educator, and she told me, she said, it's unbelievable, it's scary how many books were disappearing from the shelves. So conservative governments are pulling textbooks that have things that were. Then one of the kids in the Q&A afterwards asked me, said, yeah, that sounds quite right. So, but do you have any suggestions? What could we do? And I did something very bad. This was the first hour, and I think it would start at 9 o'clock or 8:30 or whatever. So and there were 3 classes together with 100 kids. And they started the day, of course, with Pledge of Allegiance. And I told them, I said, it would be a good idea perhaps to forget about the Pledge of Allegiance, starting every day with Pledge of Allegiance. How come? This is really something that is diminishing any critical thinking. And then afterwards, I went to the teacher and said, well, listen, I'm sorry, I probably stepped on many toes, and this was politically incorrect.
Wow. In 1943, in Barnett versus West Virginia, they actually ruled in 5-4 decisions that it was illegal to make people stand up and get. So, I mean, it's been illegal for over 70-something years. So it's still good, though. Is that right? So you're right.
Yeah.
You didn't know that you were right. Okay. Bangladesh, you have a question?
My final question.
May I have
my final question, please. Sorry. How did you know about the great program developed by Mr. Cunningham, and why you decided to visit Texas in order to start this kind of video conferences with people around the world?
Well, this is, I do this like once a year. I'm going for 2 weeks and coming to speak for, and we do this year with the American Council in Germany and the World Affairs Council, and he's a representative of the World Affairs Council. And when the American Council in Germany approached some of the chapters here in the U.S., he said, yeah, I like to have them down here and do exactly this thing here now. So that's the way.
Yeah, Ben's a really good friend, Enrique, and we've had the Mexican consulate come, and we're going to have other people come and talk. So it's a real good experience, and I want to add the international component. So I was really appreciative that both you guys were able to join us today to at least be able to get the flavor of this, because anti-Semitic or genocide education is so important. We're studying some different topics. 100 genocides. 10 of the largest genocides took place in Russia, all under Stalin, with almost 100 million people dying. So, I mean, people do not even realize, and there's commonality amongst all that. You change the people around, but the deaths are still the same. It could be
Okay.
stopped. Bangladesh, you have a question? Then we'll go to some questions.
Sir, excuse me, sir. Excuse me, may I have the permission to place my question before you?
Yes, go.
Yes, thank you, sir. The session was very informative and smart, and we have got a lot of information from our honorable diplomats. And I think that the speaker who has visited a lot of countries and he has a vast experience and he has also mixed with the different cultures and he has also interacted with the peoples around the world. And I would like to know from him about the Holocaust or genocide that happened in Germany from 1941 to 1945. Does the young generation of this time still hold the mistrust about the Jews?
He wanted to know if young people today in Germany still have mistrust about Jews like it was back in the 40s.
Oh, well, there is, as I said, we still have a certain amount of anti-Semitism in Germany. Oh, and then mistrust, or they think that they're too rich, or they work with Israel, or they drink the blood of Christian children on Easter and things like that. These are things that a certain small percentage still believes in and things. And the big thing that really came up, which unites actually all these right-wing extremists worldwide, is something that I wasn't aware about, and I misunderstood that also in Charlottesville.
Mm-hmm.
It was now 2 years ago. Yeah. So there were these right-wing radicals in Charlottesville with their tiki torches, and they were chanting, "Jews will not replace us." And I thought, wow, there are not that many Jews. How do you think, you can't be afraid that they will replace you? And this is like perhaps here 1% of the population or so, and then in Germany it's 0.2%. How could you be afraid of that they will replace you? And then I found out only then this is the rallying cry, the war cry, because this is another conspiracy theory, that they claim that Jews are bringing colored people in to replace the white race in Europe, in the US, and this is one of the things, and you've got these crazy people, and and I don't believe, like somebody else here, that there are good people on both sides. I don't believe that. I think there are only bad people on that side, and who are running there with the tiki torches. And but you still have some, but it's a very, very small number.
Okay, thank you, sir, for your evaluations. I have a second question. Can I place it, sir?
Yes.
Yes, okay. The ethnic cleansing is happening around the world, and I think that the world leaders are working on it. And, in Bangladesh, there are about 7 to 8 lakh refugees, Rohingya refugees, and they are evacuated from Myanmar. And that today is the UN Day, and on this day, United Nations was formed. And in this perspective, what are the roles the UN are playing to lessen around the world, and what is the stake for the Rohingya refugees?
Well, you're probably more aware of what actually is happening with the United Nations and the problems with Myanmar and Bangladesh and the Rohingya, and I think it's the United Nations organizations are on the ground, and they're seeing to it that Rohingya, if they want to, I'm not quite sure if I would want to do that if I were in their shoes, but to return to where they came from, where they were driven away from in Myanmar. I think the United Nations is going to do their best there, and unfortunately, this is one of the things that is being held up as a principle, especially also by the countries of the third world, that they say, you're not allowed, states are not allowed to meddle into the internal affairs of other countries. And so this kind of binds also the hands of the possibilities, limits the possibilities of what the international community can do to help those refugees in Myanmar.
Yes, but to have the permanent solutions, we need the permanent solution. And for this, I think that the Bangladesh government is also struggling to have the concentration of the world leaders. And I think that we are expecting that a permanent solution will come out so that the Rohingya refugees can be repatriate. Okay, and I think that for in this regard, as you are the world leaders, and I think that what are the steps that you may take to solve the crisis?
Well, let's hope that they will hear your pledge, and it's a totally difficult situation there. So, and unfortunately, ongoing now for 3 years, 4 years or so. So this is really.
How many people have left Myanmar from this? How many people are involved in this?
Rohingya refugees, sir.
So how many refugees do you have in Bangladesh right now from Myanmar?
I would say about 7 to 8 lakh people. 7 to 8 lakh people.
I think we can't hear from here. I think Texas solve the problem there in any case. So it's we just wish you luck. You know that some solution will be found, but it is difficult and it's another struggle.
Oh yeah. Do you see any quick solutions?
Yes, sir. Can you repeat, sir?
Yeah. Do you know of any quick solutions to that to help out there?
Yes, as you know, that Bangladesh leaders, Prime Minister, she is trying to have the concentration of the world leaders, and you know, the Rohingya people are struggling their life in the areas where they are living a vulnerable life, and they are struggling. Actually, they cannot have the quality life. Okay, and I think that the world leaders, and I think that they can concentrate on the issue, and I think that they can get some solutions so that we can also get relief from the sufferings.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay. Now,
and we are opening the floor now. Here.
Thank you, sir.
This time around this year, you're the first. You're the first, and last year I went to colleges. Well, after I left there, so there's no further feedback. But we had a very, very interesting discussion. So.
What do you think the biggest problem is for like genocide education, especially among young people today?
It's just the knowledge, and to also to compare, to put it into perspective and see what's happening. And unfortunately, you've got these, genocides, you've got this all the time. You had it in Myanmar, you had it in Rwanda, you had some horrible scenes in former Yugoslavia. So unfortunately, these things, they happen again and again and again. And
well, even in Armenia, you can't even talk about that. That happened 100 years ago.
Oh, that was, and yes, of course. I mean, unfortunately, there are some, like the Turks, for instance, who up to today, they say, no, nothing happened. You know, there were about 600,000 Armenians, who came at that time. So, and
probably close to half. No matter what.
That's lower.
Yeah, you know, there are always going to be some people who are going to argue it was 5.9 million or 6 million. Once again.
This is one of the things I always say, that, for instance, there were some people in Germany who said, we have to go after the Serbs. What happened in Srebrenica, they killed, I think, about 8,000 to 9,000 young men. They captured them and they just executed them. And so people said, oh God, this is like the Holocaust. And others said, oh, come on, you can't compare this to the Holocaust. But I say, for the one person, the one individual who in Belarusia is staring into the muzzle of a gun of a German soldier at that time was killed, or one young guy in Srebrenica who's staring into the muzzle of a gun that is going to kill him. There's no difference. It's for every individual involved. It's exactly the same thing. And then for the perpetrators also, this is a way to dehumanize people, that you just kill people like they are, I don't know, rabbits. So this is something else.
What was the general knowledge of the people living in Germany at the time with, you know, the final solution? I mean, since many of the camps were way away.
They were very careful not to have the extermination. There were concentration camps in Germany, and they also, in those concentration camps, they killed people daily, on a daily basis. But the so-called extermination camps, where they really, like in an industry, like a factory, they killed people and gassed people. This was in the east, far away from cities and towns. And there are some Germans who say, you know, this was just Hitler and a handful of people who did that. That, of course, is rubbish. Because, I mean, you needed, at least you had all the camp guards. You had the train conductors who drove the trains to Auschwitz. You had the people who were, well, many didn't really think that happened to them, but they saw the people who were taken out of their apartments in the cities in Germany, just taken out, loaded on trucks and herded off to the east. They were going to working camps. Well, how many really believed that and how many did not believe it, I'm not quite sure, but I remember just from my own family. My mother told me the story that in 1944, in the autumn of 1944, so that was absolutely going towards the end of the war, and with the majority of Jews already had been killed. Her uncle came from the front somewhere in the east and visited his sister, my mother's mother. And normally, if somebody in times of war, you know, you come from the front and you survived, you're not wounded, you still have your arms and legs, whatever. So this is actually a moment, you know, of great joy and hi, how are you, whatever. So and he came to the apartment where they lived, and just said hello to the kids, and said to his sister, I have to talk to you. And they went into the kitchen, and after 20 minutes, when they came out again, my grandmother was beside herself, and it was difficult to talk to her. She was kind of in shock. And well, but they never found him. She never talked about that. You know, if the kids asked, what happened? What did he tell you? What happened? Did he die or something? No, it's okay. It's okay. And then after the war, when these police came out, what had happened? That's when my mother and her sister remembered that day when the uncle visited. They asked him about it. Did you know about this illness that day? Of course, I mean, nobody would talk about that, because if you talk about that, you're the next one going to the concentration camp. So there were probably quite a number of people who didn't participate, but didn't know and didn't do anything because they were afraid. But there were at least, I mean, out of, I don't know, we had 60 million, population of 60 million or something. I'm sure that there were at least, not just this handful of people, but 500,000, 1 million people who knew directly and participated somehow in that.
We probably have to end the conference. We appreciate Bangladesh and Enrique. I'll send you copies of this. And thank you so much for participating today.
Thank you, sir.
Very much.
Okay. We're going to do a photo. So everybody get up here.